So then we're not denying our feelings. I mean, some people talk about, especially Zen, as if somehow you're supposed to be above all this and have, just be calm no matter what. No, that's so wrong. You're supposed to feel your feelings. We're not trying to be less than human or superhuman. We're trying to be fully human. And I'm just sitting there in so much pain. And my wife turned to me and she said, "It's only pain." And I went, oh yeah, pain is the correct feeling. Pain is what I should feel right now. There's nothing to do but feel pain right now. That's what I should be doing. But the problem is when we have a difficult emotion, we feel like something's wrong and we feel like we should do something. And usually the do something is to bring down our feeling, not actually to help the situation.
100%.
And that's always a mistake, or almost always a mistake.
You study psychology, you study Buddhism, both very deeply. How should we approach trauma and mental health? Like there is a crisis of anxiety and depression when at the heart of the Buddhist concept is that there is no self.
First of all, the no self teaching isn't a good teaching for a lot of people. It's the wrong teaching. That's a strong medicine that you have to be ready to take. And what do we mean by no self in Buddhism in general?
Hi, Doug.
Hi, Cara.
So happy that we're here today to chat about just everything Buddhism, psychology, karma.
All the meaningful things.
Yes, so meaningful. The essence of the universe, you could say.
We've scared off all of our listeners now.
That's what they're here for. My listeners, they're here for this.
Okay.
Welcome to another episode. This is Sentient Beings, a podcast about practical spirituality. We are thrilled to have Douglas A. Gentile as our guest. So Professor Gentile is a distinguished professor of psychology at Iowa State University. He is also an award-winning research scientist, educator, and author. And he is recognized as one of America's best 300 professors by the Princeton Review. He's a leading expert on the impact of media on children and adults, and his work has been featured on NPR, CNN, the New York Times, and much more. But there's more. He's also Venerable Myeong'il, a practicing Zen Buddhist monk and meditation teacher with decades of experience in both scientific research and Buddhist practice. He is the author and narrator of the best-selling audiobook Buddhism 101, How to Walk Easily Over Rough Ground, and Meditation, The Busy Person's Guide to Cultivating Compassion and Positive Mind States. And he's also the author of Finding the Freedom to Get Unstuck and Be Happier, which I personally really enjoyed reading. His unique blend of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy has led to profound insights on mindfulness, anxiety reduction, and happiness. We're excited to have him with us here today.
And that's all the time we have. Thanks.
Welcome, Doug, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
So, how do we know each other? Do you remember?
How do we know each other? Well, I used to teach here in this beautiful temple before COVID, and your aunt runs this temple. And so I know your aunt, I know your mother, and I'm sure you were around here some of the time too, but I don't have a memory of first meeting you. Is there a story?
No, but I remember being in one of your lectures here, and it was here in this hall. I remember, you were talking about something like guilt is like a second arrow or something like that. Like the first time that you did something, it was the first arrow, and then the guilt is the second arrow. I just remember that, and I was here, and I attended one of your class, I think.
Oh, well, that's an interesting. Let's start with guilt. I know you've got a plan for what you want to talk about, but let's derail it right away.
We can start anyway.
Because I think guilt is something a lot of people struggle with, and my take on the Buddhist view of guilt is that you want to distinguish between guilt and remorse, and perhaps also shame, that these actually are different emotions. In traditional Buddhist psychology, remorse is considered a positive emotion because it recognizes that you made a mistake and that you're changeable, that you feel bad for the mistake you made, and you now are going to use this information you have now to try to do better in the future. Whereas guilt crystallizes it into I'm a bad person. It stops being changeable.
Yeah.
And shame has a similar flavor too, that there's just something wrong with you and doesn't feel as changeable. And so those two are a mistake in a sense, because they're just punishing you with no reprieve, right? If you're just a bad person, then there's nothing you can do about it. And so that's actually a terrible mistake. And why would you do that to yourself?
And also, it's a kind of delusion too about the situation and yourself. Like you being the victim is a kind of egocentric view as well, even though it's self-punishing.
Yeah. So remorse, healthy remorse is actually a good thing, where we recognize that, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's not the end of the story. There's, you can change that. You can learn from that. You can grow from that.
Right. So how do you not feel guilty, perhaps, or how to feel more remorseful and more future oriented, like I'm not going to do that again, that hurt somebody?
I think you've hit it right on the head. It's about action. The guilt keeps you locked in place, right? I'm not okay. I'm bad. I never get it right. Whereas the remorse is, I did a bad thing. I got it wrong. And now what? What can I do to change that, so that the next time I'm in this situation, I don't make the same mistake? What can I learn from this? What could I do differently? Is there someone I need to apologize to? Over lunch, you said, what if I make a mistake? What if I'm trying to teach someone about Buddhism and I make a mistake? And the answer I gave you was, you admit it. You apologize. You ask if there's something you can do to help. And that's it.
And my concern was, shouldn't I just not talk about Buddhism at all if I'm going to make dire mistakes? Because I've been taught that if you speak wrong words about the Dharma, you become like 500 years reborn as a lowly being or something like that.
What do you want to be?
Like, I
You want
guess
to be a
they said
fox?
like a
Trickster?
fish
A
or like
fish?
a monkey. Yeah, I don't, or like they said like a dumb animal, like a cow,
Okay.
which I don't think they're that dumb, guys. Um, it's just that scares me. I think they're trying to make sure people don't just go around talking nonsense, right?
That you should feel some confidence in your own understanding before you try to share it. I think that's fair. I'm not sure it's so fair to scare people by claiming you're getting 500 lives as something you don't want to be.
I see the comments, you guys. I know what you're saying. I am trying to be vigilant. I am.
And different types of Buddhists have very different opinions about those, for lack of a better word, karmic rebirths. That I tend to think of the 6 realms. So you have an animal realm and a hell realm and a hungry ghost realm and a human realm and a jealous God realm and a God realm. I tend to think of those as psychological states rather than next lives. But we've all felt like hungry ghosts, where nothing was good enough, that no matter what you were doing or could try, you couldn't get enough. We've all had that experience. We've all felt zoned out and kind of dumb like a lazy animal. We've all felt the rage and pain of anger and jealousy, so that's the hell realm. We've all felt blissed out, where really we didn't need to pay attention to much of anything. There's the God realm. We've all felt like really excited about the things we have, but then we're also looking over at the people who have something a little better, and now we want what they have. And there's the jealous God. These realms don't need to be someplace next you're going to. We get all of those here today. In fact, we probably get all 6 of them today at some point in the day.
And it happens so spontaneously too. Momentarily,
Yeah.
you can shift from the gods to the hell
Yep,
realm.
very quickly. But that's good news because none of these are permanent. And there's another basic Buddhist idea.
Yeah. Speaking of impermanence,
I'm really throwing her off her script.
I have so many. Let's talk about kind of your psychological research. I mean, not the research part, but like, your expertise on psychology and science.
Sure. I've spent most of my career looking at media's influences on
Yeah.
children, adolescents, and young adults. So this is almost all media. I've studied television and movies and music and video games, and to a lesser extent, social media and
I
internet.
see.
I study both what we would consider positive effects, like educational media,
Yeah.
and negative effects, like video game addiction.
Yeah.
I study both what we would consider intentional effects, like advertising, where they're trying to have a certain effect, and unintentional effects, like media violence and aggression. So, if it has to do with media and children's health and wellness, I've probably done something on it in my career. And
Yeah.
so that's most known for work on media violence, violent video games, and these days, gaming disorder, or what colloquial people talk about as video game addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Yeah.
also done a couple studies on mindfulness practices, but not too many studies that those are just every now and then after doing enough violence studies, I want something happy. And so I do a mindfulness study that.
And
Okay.
also, you're literally a monk, so you have firsthand experience of mindfulness practices rather than studying about it, right?
Just studying them without knowing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And there's a place for that too, though. The uninvolved scientist, just testing it and doesn't have any opinions going in. I think there is a place for that. But there's also a place for people who are experts in some things coming in and using their expertise to try to create perhaps a different type of study.
So, kind of talking about, the impact of media on mental health, especially on children and perhaps young adults. How can your knowledge about that, like from a psychological perspective, as well as from a Buddhist principle perspective, how can individuals navigate the challenges that we face today being inundated by advertising and social media, just media oversaturation? For me, myself, it's infiltrated my brain and how I function. I realize that I am taking on the thoughts of the influencers that I follow, of the characters in TV shows. It's hard to be me because I am watching and consuming all these things. What, in your perspective, is kind of the antidote?
There's so much in that question. So let me start with what you've already given a lot of the answer. You may not realize it, but you notice these things. Most people don't notice. Most people don't believe that. I love to do this. When I go speak, and I speak to lots of different types of groups around the country, and I'll have a room full of 500 people, and I'll say, "How many of you think advertisements affect people a lot?" And all the hands go up. And then I say, "How many of you think advertisements affect you personally a lot?" And all the hands come back down. Well, those
Oh,
can't both be
I would be
true.
up.
Yeah.
Why do people think that they're not affected? They're so subliminal.
They think they part of the reason this is called in psychology the third person effect. That we all think other people are more influenced by things than we are. We all think other people's children are more influenced than our children, right? And it has a basis in honesty. The honest thing is, it is easier to see someone else be influenced than see yourself be influenced. Because to us, the way we think just feels natural, even if someone else gave you the thought.
Whoa. Yeah, that's hard
That's hard
then.
then to see it. So the fact that you are seeing these effects, that these are not really my thoughts coming out of my mouth, that I am not feeling like myself, that I'm more anxious, whatever it is, you're already paying very close attention in a way most people don't. And I think that's due to your
Interesting.
Buddhist practice, because
Probably, yeah.
Buddhism is a science of mind where we're trying to pay finer and finer attention to our mental states.
Yeah.
And why are we having this mental state, and where did it come from, and where is it going, and is that in a positive direction or a negative direction? So you've already trained a lot to even be able to notice that. Most people think that advertisements don't affect them. At the same time, they go out and buy a shampoo uh, that they've seen advertised a lot of times.
Yeah.
But at the time they're making that decision, they're not remembering the ad. They're just going, normally I use this shampoo, but today I think I'll try this one. And it feels like their honest choice. And in a sense it
Interesting.
is, just because they can't remember all the little nudges they've had over the years
I see.
that made them more willing to try something new.
Yeah. Okay, I get you. Like, the brand has subliminally inserted into their brain to the point where they're not even realizing they're making a buying decision based on the familiarity of the brand and the
Right.
yeah.
And in a previous life, I used to work in market research.
Ooh, fun.
So I used to sit in
You
rooms
know all
full
the
of
tricks.
advertisers. I
Yeah.
do know many of the tricks. And I heard how they talk about you. I
Uh-huh.
heard how they talk about me.
Millennials
No,
or
no, just
Asians?
people.
Okay.
Because people aren't actually all that different. I
Mm.
mean, we're talking about
Even
basic.
those who think that they are immune
Oh, those are the ones who are affected the most. That's what the research shows.
because they are so sure that they're not
They don't
affected.
even try to resist.
Yeah.
They're not even paying attention.
Yeah.
It is basic ignorance. They're looking the other way, which is when the ads have their biggest effect on you. For example, everyone drives past billboards on their way to work or school. How many times do you think you need to go past a billboard before it has started to have a measurable influence on your attitudes?
Billboards has never affected me. That's my first thought. It's
Right?
just like
That's
I'm
everyone's
focused on
first
the
thought.
road. I want to say I started remembering a billboard with a guy who his signature is like this really big beard, and that's his injury lawyer brand. And then I remember it after like 2 or 3 times.
3 times is the
I
magic
see.
number.
Okay.
After only 3, and you don't need to have read it carefully. You don't need to have
Yeah.
talked about it out loud with someone in your car. You're just driving down the road. You're paying attention to the road. You glance at it. You notice it's there. After only 3 times, if I gave you a survey and I asked you to rate how attractive were different brands or how likely you would be to buy different brands, you would rate it a little bit higher, not a lot, than if you hadn't gone past that billboard 3 times.
And familiarity automatically increases the how much you like the brand.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a long string of psychological steps here that we won't bore your
I see. I see.
your
I see.
listeners with,
Yes.
but familiarity is a major piece. This is why people put out lawn signs for political candidates, because the more you just see the name, if you don't know anything else, right? If you already are a loyal Republican, seeing a Democrat's name isn't going to change your opinion, right? But if you don't really
Yeah.
have any particular opinion to begin with, the name you see more, you will like more.
Yeah.
And then once you like it more, you're more willing to be persuaded by it.
Hmm.
So there are great studies where we like show people photographs of people they haven't met. But we do it so fast you don't even know you saw a photograph. So it is true subliminal. And we could come back to what you think you meant when you used the word subliminal earlier isn't what
Probably not
psychologists
the
mean.
right, use of it.
But this case truly is subliminal. You don't even know you saw a photograph.
Okay.
And then I let you loose in a room with lots of people. Some of them you've seen the photograph of. You just don't know it. And the people you meet all try to persuade you about something. The people whose photographs you saw, even though you don't know it,
Yeah.
you are more persuaded by their statements.
I knew it. Gosh.
So it's very hard to know when we've been influenced. And
also
often,
corporations are throwing money with these techniques and we're helpless.
and billions with B of dollars. Now, they wouldn't corporations are not stupid. They would not spend that money unless they're making money on then
And
if
they
it
are.
works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just because a particular ad doesn't work on you doesn't mean that ad doesn't work. Ads are
Oh,
targeted for very specific demographics, and here's where
I see.
your Asian woman maybe does matter,
Yes.
because some ways of portraying things you would get in a way it would go over my head and
Uh-huh.
it wouldn't work.
100%. Yeah.
Right. So, but the basic psychological processes are just how the brain works, and the brain works pretty much the same whether you're male, female, child, adult. I mean, there are some differences, but you know, largely what we're talking about here is learning, and how learning then influences the way you think, which influences your behavior. And what do you know? That sounds awfully like Buddhism, doesn't it? Pay attention to your thoughts because they become your words. Pay attention to your words because they become your deeds. Pay
Yeah.
attention to your deeds because they become your character. I mean, that's a basic
Yeah.
Buddhist idea. So we need to be paying attention.
So what is the answer then? You know, it's like, okay, I don't want to have these things in my head. I want to be mindful and present and myself, and I want my decisions to be mine, or at least I choose them. You mentioned in your book, Finding the Freedom to Get Unstuck and Be Happier, you went into pretty in depth about how a lot of what is called freedom is not necessarily what you think freedom is. And I think you touched on that just now, just how a lot of it is just like unconscious, and you grew up with these beliefs from what society told you, what other people told you, and you now think that's your own, and you
Right.
make decisions based on these preferences, but that's not freedom, just choosing what you prefer, right?
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk more to that?
Sure. So we need to start from recognizing that humans are amazing learners, right? You do not have to try to learn to be able to learn. If you watch a TV show and you're just vegging out and you're just relaxing and you're doing it as mindlessly as possible, at the end of it, if I ask you what happened, you can tell me
Hmm.
because you learned it. You weren't trying to learn like you do at a lecture, and yet
Hmm.
you learned it probably better than the lecture.
Hmm. Hmm.
Isn't that funny? So our
Hmm.
brains pick up influences from everything you do. Anything you see, anything you smell, anything you say, anything someone says to you, anything, all of it you learn. Now, forgetting happens too. So we're not saying that you learn it and it's permanently in there. But the more times you come into contact with something, that kind of burns it into your brain. So it starts becoming more and more permanent. And so as we learn things, and we learn things from our families, we learn things from our own experience, we learn things from our culture, as you said, but we're not even aware because we weren't trying to learn.
Hmm.
So they're just in there, and they're influencing the way we think, and they're influencing the way we feel, and they're influencing the way we act, without our knowing why those happened. They just feel like us. And why do they feel like us? Because they are us by now. All those influences have shaped you into who you are. And so they're not separate. They really are you, but they weren't yours to begin with.
Okay.
But they now are yours.
Hmm.
And so there are things maybe that always were yours. You know, some babies like certain flavors and not others, right from the time they're little babies. Now our taste can change still as
Hmm.
adults, uh, but there do seem to be some things that, you know, our preferences in the way we are. Some babies are more calm, some are more anxious, some are right. There are temperament differences you can see right from birth. So that's
Right.
before they could have been given to them by culture or their parents or things like this.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to say you're only a feather flowing in the wind being gusted about,
Yes, sure.
because the feather was yours to begin with and the winds aren't yours, but yet the direction you're going is a combination of
Mm.
the featherness of you and the different winds that you're feeling at a moment. And
Okay.
what we tend to think as Americans is freedom is getting more of what we like and less of what we don't like.
Mhm.
So uh, I go into a certain restaurant, and I actually, there's a restaurant names called The Spice. It's a Thai restaurant. It's very good. And I walk in, and the servers don't even ask me what I want because they know what I want, because I always order the same thing every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you that's my choice, but it's not a choice. It's not my free will. It's me carrying on the programming from last times, because I learned I like this, so that I got reinforced for it. So I learned that this is a thing I like, and then I had it again, and that reinforced it again. And so now I'm just continuing on the same way, we train dogs, which is, you give them a command and you give them a treat. And after a while, they do the command without the treat. And sometimes they do the command on their own, hoping to get a treat.
Like Pavlov's dogs, right?
And so we are creatures of habit. Once we've established a
Absolutely.
habit, that's not your free will anymore. Your free will only happens when you're not being pushed around by your habits. Now, that said, so the first time you encounter something, have you ever had durian?
I heard you talk about it. I know how much you hate it. I am in the middle with it, but my sister and my mom loves it.
Love it.
Yeah.
But you've had it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So for people who don't know, it's an East Asian fruit. It's, about
Big and
it's
spiky.
about this big, and
It's
it's
kinda
got
smelly.
Oh, it's really smelly. It's anyhow, I've heard two camps of thought on
Mhm.
this. One is you either love it or you hate it. And the other is you need to try it 7 times and you'll learn to like it.
Yeah.
I do not believe that latter one anymore. I've had it 4 times and I'm not learning to like it. But the first time I had it, I'd heard about it. I heard that it smells like combination of skunk and wet socks.
Okay, well, you already are biased towards not liking it.
Right. So that's what was told to me.
So that was unfair. But Darian didn't have a chance. That was unfair for Darian.
But my first time I had it, I actually was very curious about it. It's weird. It's kind of custard.
It's creamy.
It's creamy,
And there's a big seed inside.
and it tastes kind of like, to me, smoky scallions.
See, when you described it like that, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, see, so you
And
have
scallions are good.
I like scallions.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I couldn't get past, but the smell stuck with me for
Yeah.
hours. That was a free experience. It was all new. Even though I'd been told some words, it's still not the same as experiencing it.
Right.
Right. The second time I had it, I had learned a lot about it because of my first time, and I did not go in with the same open attitude. I went in thinking, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this, and I didn't like it. And the third time I had it, it was even more closed off to me. So that first time we try something or have an experience, everything's open and fresh and raw and vibrant if we're paying attention. The second time is never the same. And it's partly because we've learned something from the first time that colors our perception going in the next time, which doesn't mean it can't be a free choice. In fact, I think the best way to say you have a free choice, or to prove to yourself you have free will, is to do a thing you know you're going to hate. That fourth time I had durian, I knew I didn't like it. And yet I still had it. I'm not just going with my past learning. I'm going against my past learning. So that's a good example.
So then why did you do it?
Because I was still trying to see if I could like it.
Were you holding this psychological concept in your mind, and that's why you're like, I'm going to go against it and not...
Well, no, at that time I wasn't thinking that. But at the time I was thinking, well, maybe these people who say you have to try it 7 times are right. And no.
So see, you are thinking about the 7 times rule.
When we're just doing the thing we always knew we were going to do, that's not a choice. The only way to make a choice is to stop and look at it again and say, all right, I know this is the thing on the menu I always get. Let me look at the rest of the menu and see if there's something else that I'd be interested in. And maybe at that point I say, no, I still want that. But at that point, it's actually a choice. If I'm just looking for the thing I already knew I liked, why do I like it? We have to ask that. Well, why I like it is because of past experiences. So it's my past conditioning that's pushing me in this moment. And as long as I just go along with it, especially without thinking about it, without taking that pause, we're just going on habit energy, in which case there's no free will there at all. In fact, that is the opposite of free will. You are being controlled by your past conditioning.
What is the proper, the better way to live life than just reactionary living.
I mean, you could call that the animal realm, by the way.
I was just thinking about that. Like cats and dogs, they just, like they can't control themselves. When they're hungry, they're gonna go for food. Like I tried training my cat and telling him not to scratch something. He doesn't stop. Like it's just like it's in their nature. And when he goes out, he'll kill birds. He can't not kill a small animal in front of him. How do we not fall into the animal realm?
And I think that the trick is to recognize, to be paying attention, right? If we're paying attention and noticing what we want, and then we question, is that what I should do now? Is that really what I want? Why do I want that? When we're just reacting, it's usually a habit energy thing. And so there's no human free will in there. If we take a little bit of time, doesn't need much. Pema Chodron says 3 breaths. Put a pause in there. When you do, you'll feel the push. You'll feel the thing you want, or you'll feel the thing you don't want. And then you can actually decide what is the right way to respond to this. And so we change from being reacting to responding. It's kind of like if you're trying to make a decision, some people say, like, flip a coin, and then you'll know what you really want. Because when it lands on heads and you say, no, I want tails, now you, right?
Ah, that's so good. Yeah. Yeah.
That you can tell the feelings there. Oh, I actually do have a preference, right? It's when someone says something nasty to you,
Hmm.
we're going to immediately feel a lot of things in reaction to that. We're going to, perhaps feel anger or fear or shame or something like this. And we're going to want to do something. We're
Yeah.
going to want to run away from it, or we're going to want to fight back, or we're going to want to, say something unkind, right?
Hmm.
Everyone's a little different in what their reactions are, and different situations might get different reactions out of you.
Right.
But you can feel it before you do it. Can you stop at just feeling it and not do it and feel it? And we've all done that too. Sometimes we've said, we think about the nasty thing we want to say in response, and then we go, should I say it? Shouldn't I say it? Now, that at least is, you're
It's the
giving yourself
frontal
a
lobe
choice.
instead of the lizard
It
brain.
is.
Yeah.
So then we're not denying our feelings. I mean, some people talk about, especially Zen, as if somehow you're supposed to be above all this and have,
Yeah.
just be calm no matter what. No, that's so wrong. You're supposed to feel your feelings. We're not trying to be less than human or superhuman. We're trying to be fully human.
Yeah.
And so we feel the anger that comes with being insulted.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't allow ourselves to react to it. We recognize that, yes, I'm angry. Wow, where do I feel it? I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my throat because I want to shout something back at this person. Huh, that's an unpleasant feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't like this feeling at all.
Yeah.
Hmm, all right, it's
Yet
just a
still not
feeling,
letting it
but I'm
control
not
you.
letting it
Yeah.
control me. And, I could go farther. I mean, just doing that is already a huge
Oh,
accomplishment.
yeah. Especially anger with such a force inside you.
But you can go farther. Wow, okay, I want to say this. If I say it, what's likely to happen? Well, I think I'm going to feel better. But will I really? I might feel a little pleasure if I can see I hurt them, but then later on I might feel guilty about it. And they might now dislike me and do more harmful things to me in the future. So this actually is going to just hurt me later.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say it, right? We can play out, action reaction in our minds to try to understand what we think actually might happen. That's one approach we can take. Another can be working with the ideas of, all right, anger has arisen. I don't like this feeling. There are techniques I can do to bring it down. So Buddhism has breathing techniques, but Buddhism has metta is considered the antidote to anger. You can do a metta, quick metta meditation.
That's loving kindness meditation.
Loving kindness. There's lots of things we can do, but we're not going to do any of them if we don't stop ourselves from reacting.
And you first have to feel out the feelings, right? Before you sit down and do loving kindness when you're feeling this like fire in your heart. I don't think it's very effective to send out love.
Yeah, if you haven't practiced it, it's not the right time to try to start.
So you gotta.
But you do it for yourself then.
Well, so what's the order of operations? You feel the feelings, you feel the anger coming up, you feel the feelings, and then when do you then turn to like, okay, let's do some breathing, some metta, some like this feeling the feeling sometimes stays and you're like, how do I get rid of it if I can't do and shout at the person, right?
Okay, so you bring up a couple great typical misconceptions.
Okay.
One is the feeling doesn't stay, honestly.
I mean, something stays for me. So what is
It
that?
doesn't stay the same. If you actually sit there and feel it in your body, in your mind, you will notice that it starts shifting.
It transforms, yeah.
It starts moving. It doesn't feel, at first it's burning, and then it's aching, and then it's, words are, messy about these things. But, and then maybe it turns into a little bit of hostility, and then it turns into a little bit of sadness or fear, and then so it actually doesn't just stay if we don't do anything. It continues to move through us.
Okay.
And the neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor looked at the biochemical and neurological response to emotions. And what she says is that any emotion has a 90-second lifespan. When you have that initial flush,
It's so short.
it is. When you have that initial flush, I don't remember all the brain things that happen, but I think your hippocampus is involved and a couple other areas, and they drop different stress hormones into your bloodstream and through your brain, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't do anything, like if you could be calm while that emotion's happening, your body has actually reabsorbed them after 90 seconds.
Oh, reabsorbed. Is that good?
Yeah, because it's what we do with our neurotransmitters. We spit them out and then we reabsorb them and reuse them. We recycle our own.
But it's not repression, right?
No, it's not repression. It's just that's just the natural life cycle of a biochemical, the biochemical aspect of an emotion. So for it to go longer than 90 seconds, we have to do something to re-up it.
Yeah.
And usually that's thinking.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So every thought you have about, I didn't deserve that, well, that just kicked on a new 90-second
And it's
cycle.
like, oh, I should have done this.
And now it's another 90 seconds. And so it continues because of our continuing to add to it.
So how do we not do that? It's so tiring.
Well, it is.
And
it's
also
hard.
You want to learn from a mistake, potentially, if you did make a mistake. So you keep thinking about it. But then, if you don't think about it, well, it's like, how do you prevent it from not happening in the future, perhaps,
Well, we don't need to do it all at the same time.
Okay.
I guess is part of the answer. So let's take anger, because anger is a good one. Anger is something everyone feels at some time. And one technique, there's one, I don't get angry very often. It's actually really hard to make me angry. But there was a time, I don't know, in the past year when I was really angry at my wife because, and it's stupid. It's so stupid. We were going to travel somewhere, and I had made reservations at a really nice restaurant, like at the halfway point of traveling there. But I didn't tell her.
Oh, surprise.
It's a nice surprise, right? But to be able to get there in time for the reservation, we had to leave our house at a certain time. So I'm trying to get her out the door, but she doesn't, but the time we had to be at our end destination.
It's still early, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't make sense to her. And so she's 15 minutes getting out the door, and I'm just angry.
Oh,
But I know
yeah.
it's all my
It's
fault.
your expectations.
So
Yeah.
my expectation, I
Yeah.
didn't tell her. She has no idea that what we're late for. She doesn't
Yeah.
even think she's late because I didn't give her a reason why this was the time I wanted to leave. So it's, and I'm just sitting there fuming and driving
Oh, because you're
and
late.
because I'm late and
Yeah.
I'm worried we're not going to get in because they told us it's going to be crowded and well, they're not going to hold our reservation, which turned out not to be true at all. It wasn't
Oh.
crowded and there was
Oh,
no problem.
okay.
But uh, but I didn't know that. So I'm just angry, and I just sat there for about 30 minutes, saying, "This is what anger feels like. This is what anger feels like. This is what anger feels like." Over and over again, just feeling it in my body. And then, of course, other thoughts would arise, like, why couldn't she have left at the time I wanted to? Or why didn't I tell her why? Or why, right? I mean, all those things came
Yeah.
up too, but then I kept coming back to
I
just
see.
how do I feel it in my body and just acknowledging, yes, anger has arisen. There's nothing I can do with it, right? It's not like yelling at her is going to help.
Mm-hmm.
It would only harm.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like yelling at me, how stupid of me not to have told her, and or I should have given her a time even 15 minutes earlier because she's always late, right. None of that would have actually made the anger better. So just acknowledging and validating, this is how I feel. It's not about whether this is the right feeling or the wrong feeling. By the time you have it, it's the feeling. And
That's my problem is why did I feel angry? Like I shouldn't be angry.
and that's
And
putting an extra load on
that's
you.
the second arrow. It's
That's way more than one arrow. Do your listeners know about this second arrow thing we're talking about?
No, do you want to talk about it?
The Buddha talked about how we will have pains in our life. It's like being struck with an arrow. But then we don't just deal with that arrow. We sit there and go, well, I didn't deserve this. How dare that person shoot at me? I want to get back at them. Right. And all those are just more arrows we're shooting at ourselves. And so we don't just usually shoot second arrow. We shoot second, third, and 48th and 290th arrows at ourselves with all of those thoughts.
I'm sorry. We're a sentient being too. We need to be compassionate to ourselves.
Yeah. And so I think these are the extra arrows. We can let go of those. Yes, that first one is we're going to have bad things happen. We're going to get angry. We're going to be sad. We're going to break things. We're going to have things broken. We're going to have our heart broken. Right? All these things will happen. We don't need to add to it. That's painful enough. And just being with yourself and saying, yes, this hurts. This is what heartbreak feels like.
Mm-hmm.
I can give a really tough example if you want.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give a trigger warning for our listeners because it talks about self-harm. So if you don't want to be triggered about a self-harm story, skip forward about 2 minutes. So my younger daughter, when she was 18, attempted suicide. And I, as an American male, had a very American male response. I was sitting there going, oh my God, why did this happen? You got to do something to fix this.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing I can do. She's either going to attempt again or she isn't. She's either going to be successful next time or she isn't. There's nothing I can do about that, right? And I'm just sitting there in so much pain. And my wife turned to me and she said, it's only pain. And I went, oh yeah. Pain is the correct feeling. Pain is what I should feel right now. My daughter is, my daughter is feeling so badly. She thinks this is an appropriate response. There's nothing to do but feel pain right now. That's what I should be doing, is just allowing. The problem is when we have a difficult emotion, we feel like something's wrong and we feel like we should do something. And usually the do something is to bring down our feeling, not actually to help the situation.
Exactly.
And that's
100%.
always a mistake, or
Yeah.
almost always a mistake. I like, one of the Buddhist views on emotion is every emotion has co-emergent properties of wisdom and confusion. That at the moment an emotion arises, go back to anger. The wisdom is that you are seeing clearly something is wrong. Something was unfair, something's unjust, someone is cruel, right? You are seeing that clearly, and that's why anger arises. At the very same moment that clarity is there, also comes confusion. And the confusion is, I don't like this feeling. I should do something. Well, the minute we start telling a story about it, we're in the confusion side. We're not in the wisdom side. And so the secret is to give it enough space so that the confusion can kind of settle out and the wisdom can shine through. And we've all had this experience where you didn't know what to do. There was a really painful situation. And you, after enough time, maybe you slept on it or something, you went, oh, I know what to do. That's because you let the confusion settle down, and now the wisdom answer came through.
The
So
sediments and mud in the water,
Yeah.
and then there's the clear water.
And every emotion has wisdom in it. That's why we don't want to get rid of them. That's why we're not trying to get past them. We're trying to learn what's real
Wow.
and true that we're trying to teach ourselves. Every emotion is trying to tell you something meaningful. But we look past it and we get stuck in the story.
Whoa. Yeah. It's treating emotions with more reverence almost. Like,
Emotions are holy.
yeah. And I think, I mean, there are so many wrong ways I feel like, I mean, some psychologists and some books I've read just keeps talking about how emotions are simply following thoughts, and you have maybe had an unconscious thought, and then the emotions follow the thought like ducklings to their mother duck. Like emotions are just an effect to a cause, which was the thought.
Yeah, that is a very old view in psychology, where that many people still, and it's
And
where
then that
emotions
makes,
are epiphenomenal. They're
yeah.
not important in themselves.
And they
And
talk about how you need to write down the original thought and then think about, like, the fallacies of it, and then think a different thought that would counteract that. And
yeah,
then I tried it, and it just is too much work. You
it-
can't find that original thought, and you're too overwhelmed with emotions.
sometimes it's correct,
Okay.
but not. I mean, anyone who's meditated for more than 6 months has realized that yes, you can have a thought and you're just sitting on your cushion, and all of a sudden you're angry, right? Yeah. But you've also had times where you were having a feeling and then thoughts flowed out of that feeling.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it's not as simple as emotions always follow thoughts. Yes, emotions
Interesting.
can follow thoughts, but
Okay.
that's not the only way emotions work.
I see.
And so this is a cognitive behavioral therapeutic approach where your thoughts matter most.
Yeah. CBT. Yes. Exactly.
That's actually a very appropriate therapeutic technique for some things, but not everything. And it's certainly not a correct approach for trying to understand you as a whole human.
And it's so tedious, so tiring, I find.
But with people who have some type of belief that's really hampering them,
Right.
that's a great
Okay.
therapeutic technique.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's not where everything. That's not. So for some people with anxiety, it is because they have inappropriate thoughts, and so training them to have different thoughts will bring down their anxiety. But that's not the only place anxiety comes from. Anxiety comes from other places too. So it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a complete view of human emotion. It's a very narrow view, and it's only correct in some situations, and it's only useful as a therapeutic technique in some situations. Whereas I like this Buddhist view, which seems much more complete to me, which is every emotion has co-emerging properties of wisdom and confusion, and your problem isn't the emotion. Your problem is you can't tell the difference yet.
So you need to sort out like the gem from the garbage, basically,
Exactly.
within
And
that
that
emotion.
takes time, and that takes practice, and that takes allowing yourself to not react, because the minute you react to it, you've now pushed the cycle, right? Now, if someone says something makes you angry and you say something now mean back, you're not going to have any space to find the wisdom, because now it's going to, escalate. It's just going to get worse. So you have to stop. And this is, one of the things that American Buddhists tend to ignore is the value of renunciation. And by renunciation, I don't mean you quit your job and you leave your relationship and you go live in a mountain. I mean,
Sounds beautiful.
it does sound beautiful, but it's not appropriate for most people. And it wouldn't even necessarily do what you think it's going to do. But
I just want to interrupt real quick. This makes me think about the story you wrote at the beginning of the book about how you actually did leave home to camp out in the woods.
Yeah, I
and then
did.
like you slept on bumpy grounds and you're like, this is not
This
what I want.
sucks. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So what I mean by renunciation here is the value of not being so controlled and just continuing the cycle, stopping doing what you've always done, renouncing your habitual patterns and saying, I'm going to try something different. And the trying something different, just stopping is hard enough. You don't even need to try to put in new positive practices yet, because until we stop the cycle, we can't change anything. Not very easily. And so if you have an anger problem and you always, turn minor things into a fight, you've got to at least stop doing that before you can really learn what else could you do. Because until, again, using that, classic Buddhist analogy that you scoop the water out of the muddy river and it's muddy and you want to drink it, shaking it more doesn't help. You have to let it sit long enough for the mud to settle down, for the clear water to basically, settle out.
Yes.
I still wouldn't drink that water, by the
No.
way. But so it's a kind of weird analogy. But maybe
The Buddha
2,600
probably
years ago.
thought like with enough gravity and time, the water will be crystal clear for drinking.
Yeah. And, maybe those waters were much less polluted than ours are, and maybe that was a fair analogy. But basically, that's what we're trying to do with our emotions, is not push them away, because that's just another way of acting out, right? That's but
And it's
acting out
gonna
internally.
repress it if you push it
And
away.
that's not going to help you. And acting out against others isn't going to help. And so we're trying to stop, here's what I mean by renunciation. We're trying to stop that habit of feeling like you've got to get away or act out of it, and just
Fight or flight.
yeah. And then what do you do instead? You treat yourself with some compassion and say, yeah, this sucks. This hurts.
Oh, that's so hard. Just staying with that.
It is.
You want to fix the situation right away so that outside fixing can fix your inside.
That's what we think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, how often has that worked for you?
Sometimes I do feel better, but then the emotions stay. So I'm like, oh gosh, well, I thought that was gonna fix my inside too, but that I needed to sit with me and understand this emotion. And there's no easy way out.
No. And it's hard to do. I mean, I'm not trying to say this is an easy set of practices. And let me give you an example of just how hard it is for the modern American to do. And I'm not saying that people in other countries it's easier for. I honestly don't know. But there's a great study that came out several years ago where they took people and they gave them lots of different experiences, from eating chocolate to being shocked with painful electric shocks. And they asked them, how much do you like each of these things? And then they said, if you had $5 to spend and you could spend it to get some more of the things you liked, which ones would you pick? And if you had this $5 and you could spend it to make sure you never got that again, what would it be? They took the people who hated the electric shock so much, they said they would spend money to never have another shock in their life,
Yeah.
right? They hooked them right back up to the shock machine. And they said, if you push that button, you'll give yourself a painful shock. Now, you just need to wait here for 15 minutes while we go set up the next experiment. 2/3 of the men shocked themselves.
Out of boredom, I know. Yeah,
right,
I remember.
because they would rather have real pain than the existential pain of being alone with their own minds. So the work is you have to confront your own thoughts, and you look around, from the grocery line. People can't stand in line.
It'll take out their
They have
phone,
to look at
fidget.
right. They
Yeah.
have to. They have to.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being in line. Why can't you just stand in line?
Because it's awkward. What do you do in line?
I stand. I
But
stand.
like, where do you look? Like,
I don't know. I look around. I see what's happening, and there's nothing wrong
what
with
if you
waiting.
make accidental awkward eye contact with someone?
Great. Oh, look, it's a human being. I recognize you're there.
Okay, all right.
Maybe they feel awkward. Maybe they don't. Why should I prejudge that for them? I'm going to tell you a real secret, and that this is one the millennials really need to hear.
Yes, let's hear it.
There's nothing wrong with feeling awkward. There's nothing wrong with feeling awkward. It's just another feeling, but it's one we've trained ourselves. My daughters, who are millennials, the absolute worst swear word they could use about something is that it was boring, right? Because they couldn't stand the awkwardness of not
Or
knowing what to do.
The latest word is cringe.
Oh, cringe. Yeah, good. And they have to be fidgeting with things. They have to be having constant overstimulation. But in fact, there's really nothing wrong with feeling awkward, because you're, first of all, the only one who knows you're feeling it. And even if other people did know and they were awkward too, there's still nothing wrong with that.
They will see that I'm awkward.
They would probably
Get
like
away
you
from
more
me.
because you're just like them.
It's like you feel like you have to be this eloquent, easy, confident, charming person 100% of the time. You never slip up. You never stutter. Like, you always know what to say. It's just like, I think we're so consumed with TV and movie characters that we think, oh, this is like, everyone talks like Gilmore Girls,
Yeah, no
they
one
have the
actually
perfect
talks like
line
that.
and puns, and everyone's
No one
beautiful.
pauses. No one says, right.
Yeah, no.
No, that's not the
Right.
way the world is.
I know. It's so weird. I hate that we have this fake reality in our mind. It's as a follow-up though, to wrap this up, is that we sit with the emotion, and then eventually the emotion turns into something else that will inform us and give us the wisdom we need to learn from it, and that's it. Because for me, I'm always the kind of person that's like, let me learn what I need to learn from this. Is there anything we need to do to comprehensively treat that emotion so that we can like move on from it?
My gut tells me that's the wrong question.
Oh, what?
And
Okay, tell me what the right question is.
I'm not sure what the right question is. I think that my problem is around comprehensively move on from it. But I'm not sure we do. I'm not sure we should. I'm not sure
Oh.
I mean, maybe there are times when that's the correct thing to do, but I'm not sure that's typically the correct thing. I
Okay,
think,
I'm treating it like a business. Like, okay, like this is the thing. Okay, next project, next
now I
project.
can put that on the shelf and I'm done. I know anger. It's over here.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
Right.
Okay.
It's going to change. You're going to change. What you care about changes. How you respond to things changes. So I think the best most of us can do is to learn what we can from each situation and try to carry that into next time. And over time that transforms it greatly. That's our mistake, is we think everything is figure outable.
Oh, is it not? It must be.
No, it's not.
But the confusion makes me feel flighty. Like I'm like, like, oh, I have nothing to hold on to. I don't know what to do right now.
Well, Chogyam Trungpa said, yes, once you get the ground pulled out from under you, you're
Yes.
falling. That feels bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
The good news is there's no ground. You're never going to hit bottom.
Oh, man.
So we're always falling.
Always in zero gravity all the time.
But okay, this is a really great point you bring up, though, is when we start coming into contact with, we don't really understand things the way we want to. That feels like we failed. That feels like we need to be more anxious. That feels like we need to double down on all the strategies that got you to this anxious part, so
My
we're going
strategy is to look up all the mindful audiobooks and listen to them, or like some self-help,
to
which gets me more anxious for some reason.
because we're doubling down on the very best strategies you used that got you to this point already. You're already anxious, so you're going to double down on the things that you
And it's saying unconsciously to myself, like, there's something wrong
you're
for
nothing,
feeling
you're
this
not
way.
enough.
Yes,
There's something wrong.
exactly. I need to learn to overcome.
So we're always trying to find a singular cause. There's never a singular cause.
It's all continuous.
It's all continuous. It's all combined. It's all interconnected, interpenetrating. Lots of Buddhist words for this.
Yeah.
We can let go of all of the needing to figure it out. And we actually find this settled, calm place underneath that does know who you are. But you've been
Yeah.
taught by society that somehow you're supposed to have a story for things and that the story is the reason. The story's not the reason. Because,
Well, it's something concise to say at a cocktail party.
yes, it's a nice shorthand. And
Yeah.
okay, that's a story,
Yeah.
and everyone will understand that story. I mean, we could go on lots of
Yeah.
ways with this, right? So there's not any one of these causes or conditions goes away. Maybe you didn't do it. So all of them are the cause, and no one of them is the cause. And so we actually never truly understand anything. An example I like to give is, can you explain a tree? No matter what you say, you're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
You can talk about chlorophyll and photosynthesis, but that doesn't explain it.
Yeah.
You can talk about seeds growing into seedlings that grow into shoots that grow into, but that doesn't explain it. If you want to understand a tree, you have to look at a tree. You have to touch the tree. You have to be in front of the tree, and you do understand it, but you can't explain it.
Intuitively.
But that doesn't mean you don't understand.
We understand it on a different level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we don't trust that level for some reason because we've been trained to think we need to explain it in words.
Yeah.
And
It's an ego thing to put labels and names to things, right?
it could be. It doesn't have to be ego thing, but
Okay.
but we're trained to do that, and it's useful to be. We couldn't hold this conversation unless we had words,
Shorthand,
and
like
unless we understood what each other meant by certain words, and we had this common understanding.
I see.
But that doesn't really explain who you are or who I am.
Yeah.
It doesn't really explain what we're experiencing in this moment. And yet, do you understand this moment? Yes, you do. But can you explain it? Well, anything you say isn't actually going to be it.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's not a problem. That's the way humans are.
Yeah.
The problem is we get very lopsided and think that only the words and stories and explanations matter, that those are the truth.
I think that's a good segue into my next question. Nobody was able to answer this for me for the longest time. I went to different teachers. And so I present this to you.
All right, good.
You study psychology, you study Buddhism, both very deeply. How should we approach trauma and mental health? Like there is a crisis of anxiety and depression when at the heart of the Buddhist concept is that there is no self. So I'll kind of give an example of why I'm stuck in this is that everyone's talking about going to therapy, that therapy is the way to get out of your own suffering. For a lot of people, it has worked.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that the more I talk about my problems, the more problems there is. And sometimes I find problems just because I need to almost have something to worry about in my life. In any case, it just feels like I am working on something that is not the point. Like it's almost like anxiety and depression is a distraction from who I know I truly am. And so there is almost like the regular self and the higher self, right? The higher self is like the Buddha nature. And the regular self is facing all these very mundane problems that the higher self, it almost like the higher self almost don't want to deal with that. Or it doesn't feel like it's connected. And so when we talk about no self, how can we still be compassionate to our very real sufferings, yet apply the concept of no self to it so that we can kind of, I want to use the word expediently cut through the delusion
Yeah.
of the self, if that makes sense.
No, it does. A lot of things in there. So let's see if I can unpack it a bit. First of all, the no self teaching isn't a good teaching for a lot of people. It's the wrong teaching. That's a strong medicine that you have to be ready to take. And what do we mean by no self in Buddhism? In general, what we mean is you aren't any of the things you think you are, or you're not just that. You are all the things you think you are, too. But none of them. So if I say I'm a professor, if I say I'm a father, if I say I'm a monk, if I say I'm a musician, if I say, I'm sitting here talking to you, if all these things are true, but none of them is it, right? So we usually, again, this does follow very nicely on what we're saying. We want to reduce things down to something that seems simple and explainable, and we can put in a box and leave on a shelf. The no self teachings are really about recognizing that you are constantly changing, constantly in motion, constantly in flux, constantly learning and adapting and growing. And so your idea of yourself is never who you actually are. And we can let go of a lot of those ideas because a lot of those ideas kind of keep us stuck for a while. But that's not the right teaching to give to some people in trauma. It's not the right teaching to give to some people in psychological distress. There was a member who came to our Sangha many years ago who I later figured out basically hated himself and came to Buddhism because he had heard we talked about no self and he wanted to get rid of himself. And ultimately, he attempted suicide.
Oh
Right?
my gosh.
Well,
That's how he interpreted it.
that's how he interpreted
Oh
it.
my gosh.
So it's not the right teaching for everyone, or at least not at the beginning. And so for people who've had real trauma, we need to recognize they might actually be injured by some of these teachings. We need to be very thoughtful. If you were physically abused in some way, doing body scans is the wrong thing. That's going to just be really triggering. That's going to make you more anxious. That's going to, right? That's
okay.
right. So I think it's important that when you enter into a relationship with a set of practices or a teacher, to the extent you can, being honest about where some of those traumas have been. You don't have to go into detail, but you tell me, you know, you have physical trauma. I'm going to make sure there are certain practices that I won't teach you then because they're not going to help you yet. And non-self could be useful for someone like that because trauma crystallizes something in you, right? Usually, Venerable Daishin, whom we've had on this show, once said to me, and maybe said to you too, I don't know, that at its core, trauma occurs when people aren't given a choice. So the way we would want to work with these types of practices is, of course, not telling them there's a right way to sit, there's a right way to meditate, there's a right. We already have to back off at that because they need to be able to feel safe to even do the practices, to feel like they're choosing to. And then, is non-self a good teaching for them? Well, trauma often traps a person at a certain point in time in some way. So that is a solid self. That is a crystallized self. And a non self teaching could help because they start seeing, well, they're more than just that, right? Um, but that's a tough thing for people who've gone through trauma to even get to. And that's a tough starting place. It might work and it would be for some people, that would be a great expedient means. It just cuts through. Oh, you're right. I am more than I'm not just a victim,
But you're saying there
right?
is even more of a barrier
I
for
think
someone who has been through trauma.
I
I
think
mean, much
it's
less
tougher.
normal people, it's hard for us to even understand that concept.
Yeah, those of us, and I'm in
I
this
mean, I'm
group.
not saying
I've never had
normal or versus trauma. I'm just saying
right.
those who haven't experienced extreme trauma.
Right. I've never experienced extreme trauma. The worst things in my life are, divorces and it kind of, not that they weren't traumatic to me, but they're
Yeah.
nothing like having been sexually
Mm-hmm.
abused, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough, I think, especially in like a group setting. You come to a meditation class, you're going to get the same instruction that everyone else is, and the teacher doesn't know what everyone's history is and doesn't know. So you have to so a lot of people leave these classes because they actually were making things worse because just weren't the right practices at that time. But again, non-self is a valuable tool to help you realize you are more than your trauma. You are more than your victimhood. You are more than these bad things that happened in your life. And in fact, if you pay attention, you'll see that you aren't actually the same person you were when you were a child when the traumatic thing happened. You aren't the same person you were even a year ago, let alone 10 years ago. But particularly with severe trauma, it's hard for them to admit that. It's hard for
So
them to
hard.
see that. That becomes such a part of their identity.
Yeah.
A
It's
woman in
hard
our
to let that
sangha.
go. It's like, well, I still feel this way, so why?
Part of our problem with trauma in the U.S. is we use the wrong metaphors. I'll give an example.
Mm-hmm.
The Dalai Lama was once asked by a reporter, I think it was a reporter, is there anything that he regrets in his long life, having fled Tibet and had a government in exile, and all the things that must have happened in this. And he said, "Oh yes, there's a time when an elderly monk came to me and said I can't do the yogas because my body doesn't bend this way anymore." And the Dalai Lama said, "That's okay. You don't need to. You're old. It's fine. You don't need to do those yogas anymore." And the monk went back to his cell and hanged himself. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, that's not a sin. He's going to get reborn in a young body and be able to do the yogas,
I
right?
was not expecting that. That's so sad.
Well, the Dalai Lama regretted it because he felt he must have not been skillful in his response if that's what the
Ah,
monk
I see.
felt his only response, his only
It meant
way
a
out
lot more to
was.
him that he couldn't do it.
And the Dalai Lama didn't recognize that. And
Yeah.
so this is why he regretted it, because he didn't give the skillful response. He
Mm.
gave a response that the monk felt this was his only
He couldn't
thing
have
he could do, right?
known. Yeah.
The interviewer said, "Oh my God, how did you ever get over that?" And the Dalai Lama went, "Get over? Didn't get over it. It's part of who I am." There's the wrong metaphor. We think we're supposed to get
Oh.
over our
See,
trauma.
that's what I was referring to, and you're like, no, you don't. That's not the right question.
Here's another thing that might help. The root word for heal is the same as the root word for whole. We think healing is getting past our trauma. Healing
Mm.
is getting over our trauma. Healing is leaving it behind. That's not true. That's not healing. That's always leaving a piece cut out of you. To true healing is making yourself whole, which means including the trauma, not letting it define you anymore,
Wow.
but also
Integrating.
integrating, becoming a whole person, a healed person.
Wow.
And so the way we use our language, we want to get over it. We want to get past it. We want to, get through it might be better, although I'm not even sure that's the right metaphor.
Because you're changed as a result.
Yeah, there's no way you can't have been changed by this. So
Yeah.
the person you are now is partly because of that trauma, and that has some good things about it, and it has some bad things about it. Okay, but as long as we're fighting the trauma like it's separate thing, we stay stuck. When we can embrace it, at least in the sense of saying, yes, this is part of my history. This is part of what made me the person I am today. But I don't have to let it keep defining me. I'm not just broken. The victim identity is real for people who've been victimized. It's not going to ever go away, but it doesn't have to be so dominant. And over time, and maybe this is what actually is meant when we say time heals all wounds. It makes you whole. It's not that it actually fixes it. You had this horrible thing happen to you. There's no fixing that. That just is the way it
You
is.
can't erase it.
Can't erase it. But we can make it whole. We can make it, that part that was broken, we can repair to the extent we have the ability, and we can move with and through and beyond in the sense of incorporating more things into ourselves uh, in addition to that, rather than beyond as you're past it and never have to look back.
I think my question now is how, because like for me, I know I have a trauma of moving here when I was in fourth grade to the United States and learned ABCs, and I was made fun of. I was, here in Iowa, I was the only Asian kid in my elementary school. They laughed and said like my lunch was smelly. And it's just like, face some racism and I had to adapt to a new culture very quickly and people I couldn't communicate. So like after that time, I dedicated myself to becoming a great communicator because I wanted to get away from that. I don't ever want to feel like I'm like a mime and like people laugh at me and don't understand me, right?
Let
I
me interrupt you right there, and then you can go on to your question. First of all, I'm very sorry that happened to you.
thank you.
And second of all, what a wonderful thing.
What?
You just described post traumatic growth.
But isn't it like
Bad things that happen
running
to us.
away in a way, like not accepting myself as normal, just normally communicate? Like I have to be a super communicator.
Yes, and maybe that motivation isn't the most skillful one, and yet it was still a skillful one because that changed you in a way that actually has benefited you. And so, yes, it's sad that that happened to you as a child, and yet you've worked with it in a way that enriched your life. And
Is it?
so, is that a bad thing then? Well,
It I will say the opposite side of that coin is when I do feel like I'm not being eloquent, I really beat myself up. Like
yeah. So you made it too harsh on yourself.
yeah, so like on the one hand, like I've become good, but then on the other, I have such a high standard for myself in order to perhaps protect myself with this kind of skill that it became my defense
But
mechanism.
that's fair, and maybe that's what you needed to do back then. But you don't need that now. So it's time to let go of that
Okay, but how?
harshness. Well, I think partly this type of, this is a karma meditation we're talking about right now, where we look at what this happened, then this happened, then this happened, this happened. You can see the chain that made you who you are now. So it is understandable that you had this, perfectionist streak about this because that was a very valid defense response to a true threat. But that threat's gone now. So do you need to keep that? Well, you've got years and years of training yourself in it, so it's not going to go away quickly because habit energy is strong. Uh, but when you feel it flaring up, you can try to remember, oh, yeah, this is what I needed then. It's not what I still need. And I can let it go. Or you can try to let it go. And you just keep practicing that.
But I'm afraid if I let go of my trauma, I wouldn't have the skill that
Oh,
I
yeah,
learned.
well, that's an error.
That's an error. That wouldn't happen
That wouldn't happen.
because
This
the
this
the
is this
habit I built around communication stayed.
is right. Habit energy is strong, and here's the thing. This is nice. Going back to the non-self for people who work with that as a training mechanism. For many of them, there comes a point when they get really scared as they get closer to actually breaking through to the wisdom of non-self, they get this real period of super resistance against it and fear. And the fear often is that I won't be anyone, right? That's not what it means, right? You're still going to be exactly the same person with the same personality, with the same preferences and likes and dislikes and attitudes. You're just not going to hold them so tightly.
You won't identify
You won't.
yourself by it.
Yeah, and if someone says you like cats, and if I say, well, I don't like cats, I'm a dog person, that doesn't feel as threatening to you anymore because
Yeah.
it's not such an important part of your identity, but it doesn't mean you don't still like cats.
You kind of just wear it as a mask, right? Lightly.
If that image works for you,
Okay.
that's fine. That's not an image I would use
Oh,
because I
okay.
think it is
Interesting.
true. I mean, the mask isn't really part of you, but your liking cats is part of you,
Uh-huh.
but it's not who you are, if
Uh-huh.
that
Right.
makes
Oh,
sense.
yeah. Well, who we are is like the essential self, right? Buddha nature.
And it's all these different preferences. And I mean, if we reduce it down to the absolute truth level of just Buddha nature, then no, that's not only who you are. You are also all the things that you
But
think you are.
that
And
wastes away after we die anyway, right? That's how can that be the self if it's so impermanent?
if we're trying with our Buddhist practice to let go of all of our personality and become just this non-reactive higher self, whatever that means, we're missing out on life. Our life is lived in the relative truth world. And yes, you have a self that's bigger than all of these things you think about yourself, but all those things you think about yourself still are you too.
Wow, this is expanding my mind.
It's,
Like, okay, you have an opinion that pineapples shouldn't be on pizza.
okay, good one.
But then that isn't a good one because that's obviously a very humorous and light one. But pretend that is
But some
very
people
important too.
some people
Yes,
think that's
yeah,
very important.
adamant, yeah.
Right.
But then how, if it's important to you, wouldn't it be so important that you must defend it at all cost, even at the cost of your life?
We recognize that it's that important to us, but it's not that important to anyone else.
But like people die for freedom. Like, there's values that people hold so dearly and important that they would die for it.
And
And that's what makes it so like
yeah,
valued as well, right?
right.
Is
You
how
bet.
much how people are swayed.
And that's true for me too. There are values I would die for. Maybe that's it exactly. If I'm willing to die for it, in a sense, I'm also willing to give it up, right? Because the minute I'm dead, that value's gone.
Oh, you go the extreme and you also give it up. Yeah.
Right. So, in a sense, you're actually still having both sides there at the same time. That I hold this so strongly, I'm willing to take myself out of the world, and now that opinion is gone.
It doesn't matter
And it
anymore.
doesn't matter once you're gone, at least not to you, right? Uh, so, I'm not sure
Okay.
this is going to the extreme may not be the
Yeah.
best
We're talking
example.
about the middle of the bell curve,
We'll go
maybe.
back to cats and dogs. So,
Okay.
I have a game I play called Dog or Not Dog. It's a horrible game. It's an offensive game. It's terrible. Here's how it's played. Whenever I see something that could possibly be a dog, I have to make a judgment, dog or not dog. Here's the rules. If it can be carry-on luggage, it's not a dog.
Okay.
So I clearly only like big dogs. Anything smaller
Oh.
than a beagle is not a dog. And cats, oh, don't even get me started on how much I hate
I
cats.
love cats.
And it kind of doesn't matter if I tell people this, right? Does it help the world if I tell you that I don't like cats and I do like big dogs? It's meaningless in a sense outside of my own head. But it doesn't change the fact that that's really how I feel.
You're acknowledging the habits that you've built up throughout the years, and also perhaps even in your DNA, your karma, whatever,
Whatever.
and you're not fighting it, basically.
And yet I'm not treating it as if it's somehow important outside of me.
And not elevating it.
And not elevating it into something that anyone else. So that's what I think his great wisdom was here, is that he can recognize that every thought you have is your thought, and it's meaningless.
The thing is, people attach their self-worth to their opinions and how much they can get either other people to agree with them or that they're validated.
It's true, and isn't that a horrible thing? Because
It-
now you're always
So
threatened.
precarious, and I know.
Yeah, because not everyone agrees with you, and now you're threatened by that.
Yeah.
Why don't we just say, this is my opinion.
Take it or leave it.
This is something that I feel strongly, and it's really meaningful in my own head and not so meaningful outside of it.
Obviously, dualistic nature doesn't exist, but then people like to think, okay, yeah, the right thing to do in Buddhism is practice Noble Eightfold Path, like we were just learning earlier today, and believe in the Four Noble Truths. If you don't believe in the Four Noble Truths, you're a wrong Buddhist, right? You're not doing Buddhism right.
Whatever.
Like there's like I don't there's kind of
don't make right or wrong.
Yeah, okay, but like I think
So
what I'm trying to get at is
here's the better way of coming at these questions, because I think you're pointing out exactly how most people think about these.
yeah, and I'm trying to get to like how do we elevate that
I
thinking?
think we elevate that thinking by trying to look at what is a better word than good or bad or right or wrong, is perhaps skillful or unskillful. And how do we know if something's skillful? Well, the Buddha gave a very clear test. If it leads to greater ease, both for yourself and others, both in the short term and the long term, keep doing it. It's a skillful action. If it led to greater stress for you or others, short term or long term, probably you need to change something. That's less skillful. And so we can keep, and there are greater or lesser skillful things. Some are really skillful and some are a little skillful. And we start learning to discern, and we shape our behavior over time, and we get more and more skillful, hopefully, with more and more practice.
What if a decision results in short-term suffering that you hope would lead to long-term happiness?
You wait and see. Did it lead to long-term happiness? In which case, then that was the right decision.
What if it never comes, but you're like, tomorrow? And then you just keep staying in with the hope.
Well, then maybe there are other things you can do in the meantime while you wait for that.
Which leads me to my next question. So I often think of, so this might be my, Eastern Chinese Buddhism coming up. I often think of bad karma as my homework or something I need to learn from, and that these situations offer opportunities for growth. However, this mindset has led me to stay in unhealthy situations longer than maybe I should have, because I feel helpless about changing them, or feel like maybe I shouldn't change them because this is
what you need now.
What I need. Yeah, my medicine. Is there truth to this idea that karma is meant for us to learn from, and if we don't learn from it, well, something similar, like a similar situation happen again in order for us to continue, in order to learn from this particular thing?
Yeah. Well, let's just go back to some basics. Karma just means action, in the sense that actions have consequences.
Yes. Oh, yes, let's establish the definition of
Right.
karma.
It doesn't mean a cosmic bank account where you have good karma points and bad karma points, and your goal is to end with a positive balance when you die. It doesn't mean that it's not every action gets an equal and opposite reaction. We all know people who do bad things that actually have good things happen to them, and right. So it's not those simplistic ways that usually it gets reduced to.
Yes.
In the U.S.
Yes.
What do you mean by bad karma? Do you mean a bad circumstance you find yourself in right now?
Just negative emotions towards certain people or situations.
Is the action the negative emotion that you're having this bad thought, or is the action what got you into having those bad thoughts? I mean, if we're going to use karma, we got to find the action.
You mean the action that got me there in the first place,
right.
Or what I'm taking after it happened?
Well, I think the situation you're in is the situation you're in. I mean, yes, we could say it's your karma in the sense that it's the result of all of the past actions and non-actions
Right.
and causes
Conditions
and
coming
conditions
together.
that came together to
Yeah.
make this moment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you mean by bad karma just you don't like the situation you're in, I'm not sure that's a good use of the word karma. But what do you do? Well, I think you're asking the right questions. Is this a situation I am supposed to learn from? What is it I need to learn here? Is this a situation that I need to do something in? Or is this a situation I just need to wait and it will resolve itself? And we can't know. One of the things I dislike about a lot of the traditional Buddhist scriptures is they seem to claim that the Buddha was omniscient and could always know what the future would bring and could always know the state of people's minds and could always know, right? And
Because there's so many infinite possibilities.
I think we wish that could be the case. We can't actually always know why we're in the situation we're in. We can't always know what the right answer is going to be. So we pay attention to the best of our ability and we make the best decision we can at the time we have to make it. And then we don't beat ourselves up if it was the wrong one because we made the best decision we could with the information we had.
Yeah.
And we go back and maybe it teaches us, oh, I should have paid attention to that. I didn't know to pay attention to that before. Okay, so now I know. Now we learn. Or maybe it's, wow, I picked the wrong thing. I thought this was going to make you happy, but really it hurt you. Oh, I should never say that to you again. I need to, or I should even ask, why did that hurt you so I can understand. It's not just saying that thing, but what else is it? What is it about that hurt you so that I can be more careful with my words in the future, right? I think part of our problem is we're trying to figure things out, but we don't use the greatest tool at our disposal, which is to ask. How would you like to be treated?
We assume.
I guess, right. And here's where all the religions kind of get it wrong. They say, do as you would be done unto. Well, that's only good.
So bad.
It's only good if I have no other information.
Yeah.
That's a great first approximation.
Yes.
But in fact, rather than me guessing how you'd like to be treated, why don't I just ask you? We don't even think to ask a lot of the time. How may I help you? That's our highest teaching in my style of Buddhism. That's what all our teachers say. There's one core teaching. How may I help you? But we forget to ask that.
I think for me, it's more so like I feel like the circumstances will disappear automatically once I've learned from them. So I don't know if that is in any way correct in the understanding of karma.
All right. Yeah. So stop there.
Okay.
There's already a lot.
All right.
So first of all, I think that's a great first approximation teaching.
Okay.
Just like do as you would be done unto is great. If you know nothing else, that's a great place to start. Telling someone that if you're in a difficult situation, it has something to teach you is a great first step because usually when we're in a bad situation, we just try to get away. We don't even look. We don't even pay attention. Right? So it is a skillful teaching for step one. It's not the whole teaching.
Basically not run away from your problems.
Don't run away from your problems. But that also doesn't mean, but some situations don't have anything to teach you.
Are you sure?
Some situations.
I want to learn from every situation.
Well, that's a great motivation. But how long do you want to keep beating your head against the same wall before you realize, oh, the door's over there? I think there are second and third steps beyond that first one. So that's a nice first teaching to keep you from running away and not paying attention. It says, look at it, pay attention, see what there is to be learned. But you may not be ready for the teaching yet, so you might not even be able to learn it now, in which case just sitting there suffering and it's not helping you either. Or it has very little to teach you because it's just a quirky situation that arose from a combination of things. in a sense, this is a very egotistical teaching.
Yeah, I
Right?
was,
You are the
yeah,
center
right.
of that universe, and the universe is all waiting. So you're just going to sit here and hold its pattern until you figure it out. And it's up to you to have the key and the universe is going to stop until you've got that key.
Well, the universe is here to teach me something,
The
though.
universe may be here to teach you something, yes, but it's not just one lesson, and they're not all sequential.
And
And you
they're
can
all
come,
not suffering.
and they're not all about suffering. No, no. In fact, I hope very few of them are about suffering.
My very formative Buddhist years were very suffering focused, I will say.
Well, there is that streak here, the same way there is in many other religions, that you start with children, and I've got an opinion about this. So, psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg came up with a theory of moral development for children, and how do they go through stages. And there have been tweaks to it over the years, and some additions to it, but in general, I think it's still a good framework. And won't get into all the nitpicky details, but basically, when we have young children, they're in what he called a pre-conventional stage, where how do the children know what's right or wrong is based on what the consequences are. If you get punished, it must have been bad. If you get rewarded, it must have been good, right? So they can tell what's good or bad only based on something outside themselves telling them what's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
As they enter elementary school age, they move into what he called conventional morality, which is where we start getting the norms of the culture. So, what's good or bad is dictated by laws and convention. And so, if it's illegal, it must be bad. If it's legal,
Mm-hmm.
it must be good.
Yep.
But again, that's an external imposed rule, but it's at least social and conventional, rather than just a single authority, usually your parent or perhaps God, telling you that's bad. And then uh, at the latest stage, and not everyone gets to this stage, and it may be a very Western centric approach to begin with, but what she called post conventional, where you start having your own internal reasons for why things are right or wrong. And those may or may not line up with what's legal, with what society says is okay. So one of the examples, and he would figure this out by giving people a set of scenarios. A classic one is a man has a wife who's very sick, and there is a medicine that could cure her. And he goes to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist has that medicine, but the pharmacist says it's very expensive. It's $1,000. And the man doesn't have $1,000. And he says, could you sell it to me for less? And the pharmacist says, no, I need to feed my family too. Um, should What should the man do? And some people, in say the conventional stage, well, in the pre-conventional stage, they would say he should not steal it because he'll get punished. He'll go to jail. At the conventional stage, he'll say, well, stealing is wrong and there are laws against it, and so he should not steal it. And at the
Mm-hmm.
post conventional stage, many people might say he should steal it because the value of a human life is more important than money or
Hmm.
the laws,
Yeah.
right? And if we look at many of the teachings of any religion, and Buddhism definitely, I think, is included in this, some of those teachings are set at the level, at these beginning level. So if you do a bad thing, bad things will happen to you. That way of thinking about karma is a pre-conventional, it's a childish way of thinking about it.
Also, that's very common among like Christianity. That's like
Also very, yeah, you will go to hell, all the fire and
very
brimstone, right?
conventional.
Yeah. And so there are people that's just the way they think, and that's the right teaching for them then, because they, without that fear of punishment, they're going to just do whatever they want, right? uh,
We're like treated like children.
Basically, it's very similar to how you need to treat a child, because they do need that structure around them. And
Like
there are,
young children.
yes, but
Yeah.
preschoolers need that structure around them, but there are adults who need that type of structure around them too. But I think not most adults. I think once we grow up a little past that stage, we start saying, I should behave well, not because I'm going to get a reward, not because I'm going to get punished if I don't, but because uh, that's what actually helps us all get along well together, and that's what helps the social cohesion. And that's the way other people like to treat. And this is the treat others as you would like to be treated. That's the conventional level. What are the conventions of how people should behave? And so my decisions about what are good or bad actions are then determined by what I see others doing. And then beyond that, we can get to a very personal relationship with karma, which is I'm going to pay attention and not do the same thing in every situation, right?
Oh, yeah.
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 Uh, and I need to be very discriminating about that. And I need to be discerning about each situation's nuances and how I act. What's a good action in one situation might be a bad action in another situation. And so it's not like one of these is the right way of viewing karma. I do tend to think there's kind of a developmental progression as we mature in our practice. We can move through them. But they're all good teachings if they're the right teaching for that person's understanding and the way they see the world. So, in terms of things like, karma as, good or bad, it doesn't just exist out there in some, that's then like, the answers coming from outside, that there's just good actions and bad actions. No, every action has a unique set of circumstances and a unique sense of consequences. And we're going to be even better at getting through our lives gracefully if we're paying closer and closer attention. And that's what a lot of this practice is about. Not about just trying to figure out how do I be good, like there's one answer to that, but what is skillful now? What actually benefits you? What benefits us? And I may not know, so I guess, but then I need to pay attention to, you know, how did that land with you? Is that okay? If I make a comment about, you've said, you're an Asian woman, and if I say something about that, maybe that works for you because you've already opened that, or maybe you're offended by that because I as the white guy should not be talking about your race, right? I don't know. I am actually puzzled right now. If I wanted to, I don't have a thing I'd want to say about it,
Oh, okay.
but if I did, I actually don't know which way it would work with you because you've actually opened it up earlier in our conversation. So
Mhm.
maybe that would be a good way of building rapport and of working with it. Or maybe it's only a thing you get to say about yourself,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
Only way for me to know, well, first of all, I could ask.
Mhm.
Huh. Well, we usually don't think to. But if I
Yeah.
don't ask, I could try. But then and I hopefully I have a good mind of a good mind of goodwill, and I'm trying to be of benefit by doing this and by picking up on a theme you already opened up. But I'd better be paying attention because maybe actually it upsets you. And now I know. Now I'd better learn from that and change and adapt. And again, it would be better if I just asked you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You mentioned in your book, early in the book. Now remind me what did you say? Pronoid?
It's an interesting thing to me that we believe we learn from our experiences, and we do. But we don't seem to learn equally from all experiences. And so especially nowadays, you brought up, there's this epidemic of anxiety and depression. That's certainly true. The numbers bear that out. It is much higher than, well, it's not quite as high as it got in COVID times, but it's come down a little, but it's still much higher than it was pre-COVID. In terms of percentages.
It's basically stayed high
It
after
stayed high.
COVID.
Yeah, it came down from the peak, but it did not go back down to where it used to be. And so we walk around being anxious and worried all the time, like the next situation is going to somehow ruin us. And we don't know what to do, and we feel like we're supposed to know what to do. Here's the secret: we're never supposed to know what to do. We're supposed to work with what we're given.
We're supposed to be bumbling along.
We're supposed to be bumbling along. But then isn't it interesting how often we get it right? So we're paying attention to something, but we
Mhm.
don't actually know what we're paying attention to. So part of the practice is learning to be better about that. I like to do a meditation with people in my group sometimes where I take 10 or 20 minutes. We're not going to do that now, but I encourage your listeners to do take 10 or 20 minutes, and you can have a piece of paper and you can write down all these things. And I'm going to ask you, what are all the things that need to happen for you to stay alive for 2 more minutes?
Oxygen.
You need enough oxygen, yeah. But for your heart to pump blood, it does need to have your electrolytes in the right balance, and you need to have the symbiotic bacteria in your body
Mhm.
staying at the right balance, so they're not too
Oh,
much or too
literally
few,
everything.
right?
That's too many things to
Well,
name.
exactly. And we could
Yeah.
go to a bigger scale. We could go to there can't be enough, too much pollution in this room. Literally, millions of things have to go exactly, it has to stay in a narrow temperature range. Humans actually can't get too hot or too cold, or we die. Uh, we have to have had enough nutrition. All these things have to happen for us to keep living. We feel like we're not enough. We feel like we can't handle this next threatening thing that's coming up. But your entire life, you look back, you always have handled it. Even the most damaging, traumatic experiences in your life, you handled. I'm not saying they didn't leave scars. I'm not saying they weren't painful, but you still could handle them. If you couldn't, you wouldn't be sitting here with me right now. It's like the universe is conspiring to make you happy every moment. Why don't we trust that? Your actual lived experience is even in your worst, darkest moments, you were enough. You got through it. Again, not without pain, not without scars. But no one said you were going to get through life with no scars.
I think because there are so many other people who have the universe conspiring for them too,
But
that we don't feel special. Like you're here too.
yeah, isn't that amazing? The universe is
And
conspiring
there
on both of
are
our
millions
behalves.
and billions of people who are alive and have lived for decades
8
as well. So it's like,
billion
what's,
people.
oh, so I'm one of 8 billion. So how special is that, you know?
You're one of 8 billion in a solar system that, as far as we know, has no other life, in a galaxy that probably has life out there somewhere, billions and billions of planets and systems. And the more we dig into the universe, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Every time we point, the Hubble telescope at a blank piece of sky, we find there are galaxies there. And yet the universe continues to conspire for you. I think you are special that way.
Yet we're not,
And
right?
and we're not, right? We're just
Because
part
we're
of a
just stars.
process.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We're part of a process. But why do we take each next thing that's going to happen as if it's an existential threat?
Expecting the
We
worst.
are always expecting the worst, when in fact, if we look at our own real lived history, even the worst things, we had enough to get through. Why don't we trust that we can handle? And this is my core teaching as a Buddhist teacher, is that we need to start trusting that the next moment will be workable. I'm not saying good. I'm not saying you'll like it, but that you can at least trust that you are enough to work with it. And the situation will give you enough that you can work with.
Yeah.
And I took this a step farther than I wrote in my book. I mean, this is in the book, Finding the Freedom to Get Unstuck and Be Happier. But I've died twice now in the past few years.
You've died twice in the
Yes.
past 2
Not
years.
2 years. It was about 8 years now.
Yeah.
Not literally. My heart never stopped.
Oh, okay.
But I was so sick that the doctors thought I would be dead within minutes, or in one case, and hours within the other case. And they never knew what was wrong with me, and I thought I was going to die too. And my daughter rushed home from college to see me before I died.
Oh
And
boy.
and I was feeling some anxiety sitting in that hospital bed, where every test came back negative. They didn't know
Wow.
and they
Were
didn't
you
know how to
feeling any
treat it. Oh, I
discomfort?
was in tremendous pain.
Oh, so you kind of are ready for right? In a way for death?
I've never had a particular fear of death, but something changed in that hospital that day where I had already recognized that if the universe, every moment of my life, has given me enough of what I needed to work with it, why do I think the universe isn't going to give me what I need in death too? And I just relaxed and I was okay. I was ready.
Wow.
And I'm not trying to hold myself up as if somehow I've figured out a secret, or that or that I'm somehow special. What bothers me about this is, why doesn't everyone figure this out and feel like this? Because actually your whole life, you really have been enough. You really have had enough. Again, that doesn't mean it felt okay, but it was still enough.
Mm-hmm. You had exactly what you needed.
You had enough of what you needed, at
Enough.
least, to be
Yeah.
able to work with it,
Yeah.
right?
Huh.
And so why do we feel anxious about somehow the next moment's going to be different?
Because change is scary
Change is scary,
and it's the unknown.
right?
And
But
it might upset the balance that we've so carefully crafted.
well, except that's all
It's an
pretend.
illusion.
That's an
Yeah,
illusion.
I know, I know.
But I think you're right. I think that is why people feel it. But yes, change has always been scary, and yet when you look back, you realize you adapted to all of it okay. Again, not necessarily without scars, but still okay.
Okay, so this leads into well, actually,
Uh-oh.
we will go into our rapid fire questions now.
All right, good.
All right, so quick answers. Favorite way to de-stress after a long day?
They don't stress a whole lot. I guess I
Or just decompress, relax, whatever.
binge watch Netflix like everyone else.
Okay, favorite dish to cook?
Ooh, pasta primavera with shrimp. I have my own recipe. I also I have a great chili recipe.
Yum. Last book that you read?
I'm reading about 10 at once, so that's a little trickier. But the one I was reading this morning was on the Chinese Vinaya, so a Buddhist book.
Okay. Last thing that made you laugh?
You.
Me? Same. Last thing that made you cry?
Well, we did that earlier, this conversation, talking about my daughter's suicide attempt.
Cats or dogs?
Oh, you know this
No.
one. Dogs, but only big dogs.
This was made for you. What is your guilty pleasure?
I don't feel a whole lot of guilt.
What is your pleasure?
But performing music is a lot of fun.
Which instrument?
I'm primarily a bass player. I lead the Ames Premier Jazz Band, Indigo Monks. We're a 10-piece jazz band.
Wow.
And I'm the primary bass player for it, but I also play guitar sometimes and sing and ukulele, and if you really want me to suck, drums.
Wow. Lastly, which Harry Potter house are you?
Oh,
Do you know the houses?
man, I do
you know
the
Harry
houses.
Potter?
I do
Okay.
know the houses.
Don't tell me you never thought which house you would be if
I
you go to
have. I've
Hogwarts.
never settled very well, though.
Okay, which two at least?
Which two? Is it Ravenclaw? That's more the scholars.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's got to be one. And I also kind of think Slytherin in there.
Whoa. So like kind of like strategic, right?
Strategic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got that kind of mind that's always trying to figure things out, which is why I know just how limiting that is. It's useful when I'm being a professor. It's not so useful in many other areas of my life. And I think
Wow.
that's the lesson to take from this is it's not that Zen is trying to teach you to stop thinking. It's to know when it's the right tool for the job.
Okay, so are there any current or upcoming projects you'd like to share, promote, or resources you'd like to share with the people?
Well, as far as resources go, they're certainly welcome to join the Ames Mahasangha, which is amesmahasangha.org. We have a Sunday evening meditation group at 6 p.m. We have a bi-monthly Buddhist study group on Sundays, 4:30 to 6. I have a membership website with Daishin, actually, that he's probably forgotten about, uh, that where lots of recorded talks and guided meditations. That's called ZenBreakthroughs.org. Then there are, of course, the books you already mentioned that I have out there, the most recent being Finding the Freedom to Get Unstuck and Be Happier. Upcoming projects, I am working on a book on the Dharma of relationships right now because I think so many of the Buddhist scriptures were written by celibate monks for celibate monks. And they may not, it's not that there aren't teachings on healthy relationships and boundary setting and things like this, but they're far and few between. And I haven't seen any other books that kind of help draw them out and show us how do we have really healthy, fulfilling relationships based on the Buddhist teachings. So I'm working on that right now.
Amazing. We will have to have you back when you've written that book
Well, great. I'll
because
see you in 6 years.
yeah, oh no, stop. Okay, great. Again, the book is Finding the Freedom to Get Unstuck and Be Happier. Highly recommended. Before we go, what is your 6-word memoir of your life? So Hemingway famously, or Delore apparently, is like he said, "You guys, I bet you guys can't write a memoir in 6 words," and then he wrote, "For sale, baby shoes never worn."
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just like short, sweet, makes people curious. What would your 6-word memoir be?
Oh, man. That's just mean.
Daishin did it. You'll have no problem.
Well, he's a better Zen master, I guess. This guy here, hope he helped.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being with us. I very much enjoy chatting about we got to a place that I didn't think we would go, and it was exactly where we needed to go. And I just really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us in such a it was both very philosophical and intangible yet so practical. So much of our suffering is in our mind and internal that it makes sense that we need to start there before any outer circumstances can be changed. So I'm glad we got to the root cause of our suffering, so to say, and also got into karma and just practical ways people can start thinking about how to enhance their life and face difficult situations and emotions. And just really appreciate
Thank you.
your wisdom.
Well, I think what's particularly meaningful to me about this project you're doing is it's about asking questions. And I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is we think what's important are the answers. What's important are the questions. The answers actually will change over time as we change, but we should keep asking the question. And so asking these questions is really what's meaningful. And the answer that's right for you isn't necessarily going to be the right answer for someone else.
Yeah.
And so can we continue to keep that mind of curiosity rather than think we've got it all figured out? Because that's when we stop paying attention, and that's when we're going to make way more mistakes.
Stay curious and
Stay
open.
curious, yeah.
All right, with that, thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.